kitchen was silent, except for the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of a blade hitting wood. It was 3 in the morning. Daud stood alone at the central prep station, his white chef hat stark against the dim emergency lights. He was 40 years old, a man who prided himself on his clean look and his steady hands. Even the small scar on his right cheek, a souvenir from a kitchen fire years ago, didn't distract from his focused, professional aura. But tonight, his hands weren't steady. He was staring at a white onion, but he didn't see the vegetable. He saw the grain of the dark, heavy chopping board beneath it. Though it seemed to be moving, the dark swirls of the grain spinning like a slow whirlpool. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a magnetic urge to just let the knife fall. He wasn't in control anymore. Long before that kitchen existed, there was a tree. It stood in a part of the jungle where the birds didn't sing and the sun never reached the forest floor. The local villagers called it the crying tree. They said it grew over the site of an ancient tragedy, and its roots drank from a well of old, bitter spirits. It was a gnarled, ugly thing that looked more like a person frozen in a screen than a plant. When a logging company finally moved into the area, the locals begged them to leave it alone. But money talks louder than ghost stories. The wood was beautiful in a terrifying way. It was heavy, dense, and had a deep, reddish-black hue that shimmered even in the dark. A boutique furniture maker bought the trunk and decided to turn it into high-end kitchenware. He didn't notice that his saws kept breaking. He didn't notice that the men working the wood started having terrible nightmares. He only cared about the price tag. Eventually, a thick, heavy chopping board, the heart of that cursed tree, was sold to a famous restaurant in the city. When the board arrived at the restaurant, Daud was the one to unwrap it. He admired the weight of it. It felt solid, like it could last 100 years. He placed it at the main prep station, thinking it would be the centerpiece of their kitchen. But the trouble started during the very first dinner service. A junior cook was mincing garlic when his knife suddenly slipped. It wasn't a bad slip, the kind you'd expect from a tired chef. It was as if the knife had been pushed. The blade sliced deep into his thumb. Daud watched as the blood hit the board. He expected it to pull on the surface, but it didn't. The dark wood seemed to drink it. Within seconds, the bright red stain faded into the dark grain, leaving the wood looking polished and almost satisfied. Over the next few years, the board became a legend in the kitchen, but not the good kind. The cooks started calling it the Leech. It became a grim joke among the staff. If you worked on that board, you were going to bleed. Some nights it was a nicked finger, other nights, a slip of a paring knife would send someone to the clinic for stitches. Daud noticed a pattern. The board didn't just want any blood. It seemed to wait for the busiest nights, the times when the tension was high and the energy in the kitchen was frantic. It fed on the stress as much as the iron in their veins. Daud tried to replace it once. He threw it in the heavy-duty bin behind the restaurant. But the next morning, when he arrived to open the kitchen, the board was sitting right back on the prep station, perfectly clean, waiting for him. He asked the night cleaners if they had moved it, but they looked at him with hollow eyes and said they hadn't touched it. In fact, they told him they were too scared to even go near that station after midnight. The atmosphere in the restaurant began to sour. The head chef grew moody, and the staff were constantly on edge. Daud felt it the most. He was the one who spent the most time with the board. He began to feel a connection to it. Sometimes, when the kitchen was quiet, he thought he could hear a low, rhythmic thumping coming from the wood, like a heartbeat slowed down to the pace of growing roots. He started talking to it, whispering apologies when a shift ended without an accident. He was losing his mind, and he knew it, but the wood wouldn't let him walk away. Then came the night of the accident. It was an unusually quiet Tuesday. Daud was finishing up the prep for the morning. He was alone. The silence of the kitchen was heavy, pressing against his ears. He reached for a white onion. As he placed it on the board, the air in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. His breath misted in front of him. He felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of vertigo. The stainless steel table seemed to stretch away into the darkness, leaving him alone on an island with that dark, hungry piece of wood. The grain of the board began to pulse. The dark swirls looked like eyes opening and closing, watching him. He felt a voice in the back of his head, not a sound, but a feeling, demanding a final payment. The small nicks and cuts weren't enough anymore. The tree was hungry for the whole harvest. Daud raised his heavy meat cleaver. His arm felt like it belonged to someone else. He wasn't aiming for the onion. He watched, as if in slow motion, as his left hand flattened out against the wood. His fingers spread wide. He felt a strange sense of peace, a horrifying acceptance of what was about to happen. The sound was like a dry branch snapping in a storm. Daud didn't scream. He couldn't. He just stood there, staring at the space where his hand used to be. The board was instantly covered in a thick, dark crimson. But this time, it didn't just absorb it. The blood stayed on the surface, swirling and bubbling as if the wood was boiling from within. The eyes in the grain seemed to dilate, drinking in the sight of Daud's agony. He collapsed to the floor, his vision fading. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the board. It wasn't dark reddish-black anymore. It was a bright, vibrant, pulsing red. It looked alive. Daud survived, but his career was over. The restaurant closed down a month later. Nobody wanted to eat in a place where the air felt like it was grieving. The owners tried to sell the equipment, but no one would touch the prep station. The board was finally dealt with by an old man from Daud's village, a practitioner who knew the secrets of the forest. He didn't try to burn it, he knew fire would only release the spirits within. Instead, he coated the board in thick, blessed wax and wrapped it in heavy iron chains. He sealed it inside a crate made of salt-treated wood and covered it with yellow talismans. Today, that crate sits in the corner of a basement in an undisclosed location in Kuching. They say that on quiet nights, if you put your ear against the wood, you can still hear it. A slow, steady thud, thud, thud. It isn't a heartbeat anymore. It's the sound of something inside, chopping, waiting for the day the chains finally rust away.